We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And we're back here on Liberty Nation Radio with our distinguished panel of longtime host of this here show and senior political analyst, Mr. Tim Donner, legal affairs editor, Scott DeCosenza, and chief political correspondent and satirist, Mr. Graham J. Noble. Now, in our earlier segments, we ran the gamut on the State of the Union and what it represented. But now I'd like to turn to what it means for Joe Biden and his 2024 prospects. Now, Tim, as of our recording time, Joe Biden has yet to officially announce his 2024 plans, although a lot of hints have been dropped. And you wrote an article on the pages of libertynation.com explaining how the State of the Union would set the stage for Biden's electoral hopes. Now that the event is in the rear view, what's your take? Have you changed your opinion or no?
Well, I think that he's going to try to do a two-track appeal like he did during the State of the Union. On the one hand, he's going to be really pro-American. He's going to sound almost America first, make sure manufacturing jobs stay here, that all the money in the infrastructure bill will be spent on American firms, et cetera, et cetera. So they'll try to claim that he's a populist in that sense. And again, I see the Trump influence there as perverse as some people might think that to be. But on the other hand, he's going to say that he has saved the country from the extremism of Trump, DeSantis, and company. He didn't go after them in this State of the Union so much. But here's what he did do. He tied the January 6th insurrection. Again, if you were really paying attention, he tied the January 6th insurrection to the attack on Paul Pelosi.
Yeah.
So that was
same paragraph. Same paragraph as well.
The same sentence.
They were using the same words, he said.
Using the same words.
Attacker, like he was inspired directly.
Right.
You know,
the two words were, "Where's Nancy?" Like, how many times in the history of Nancy Pelosi's octogenarian life has somebody said, "Where's Nancy?" Okay.
Sure, Tim, maybe plenty, but they were all racists, of course.
So he's going to save the country, Joe Biden says, from these extremists and try to, he'll talk unity and he will run as a divider like he did in 2020. And the press will call him a unity candidate. They'll call DeSantis or Trump or Youngkin or whoever else gets the nomination as a divider and an extremist and someone who, Joe Biden himself demonized half the country, as we've discussed during his administration. That should be brought up heavily by whoever the Republican nominee is. But he will continue on this theme for one particular reason, will the president, and that is that he has elite media behind him all the way to the end. He had it in 2020, and he'll have it again in 2024, which means he'll be more effective at getting the public to buy what he's trying to sell than he would ordinarily. But let's not forget, he has been stubbornly stuck at 44% approval, Joe Biden, for a long time now. Actually, a remarkably stable job approval number. 44% is not a reelect number. Presidents do not get reelected with 44% approval. So he's going to have to amp that up. He really hasn't hit any higher than 46. And at one point, of course, he was in the 30s. So that's an indicator that, he's going to need a lot more fuel for the engine if he's going to win a second term.
Yeah, I think it was only Harry Truman who managed to pull off getting elected with the low 40s. But that required an enormous amount of energy traversing the country back and forth in the last
I don't see Joe Biden on a continental whistle stop trip like Harry Truman in 1948.
It's unlikely. I mean, I believe that Joe Biden was with him during that trip in his first years in Congress.
He was one of his senior advisors, I think.
Yeah. Again, also to Julius Caesar. Now, Graham, do you think anybody was swayed by what Biden said? And I'm talking specifically with a lens to 2024. I think there's a significant number of Democrats who don't want him to run again, but they'll still check the box marked Democrat if he is the nominee. But do you think he has used this opportunity, because the State of the Union is an opportunity, to help or hinder his chances with the all-important independence?
No, I don't believe so at all. And specifically for independence, I can't imagine how anything he said last night would have swayed anyone who has been paying attention, because we've heard this all before. The touting of the records, job creation, which is actually a complete mirage, and inflation coming down, which in real terms is not. I mean, it is happening now, but of course it's only coming down from a horrendous spike. It's not actually lower than it was, before Mr. Biden came to office. And so all of those phony and a lot of independents, that's what they're looking at. They're looking at the economy. They're looking at their paychecks. They're looking at how much they're paying in taxes and what they can afford, what they can and cannot afford to do, and throwing out these phony accomplishments, economic accomplishments of the Biden administration is not swaying any independent who's paying attention. And as for the Democrats who perhaps don't want Joe Biden to run for another term, and I personally believe there's a very good chance that is actually most Democrats. I don't just mean among the voters, but I mean actually among current elected officials in the Democratic Party. I can't believe for a second that most of them actually are enthusiastic about Biden running for a second term. But of course, what do they do about that? They're really between a rock and a hard place on that. But yeah, I mean, coming back to the question, did the address itself sway anybody who was perhaps not on board with the Biden platform? No, I can't imagine why it would have done that.
Okay. And Scott, what do you think the DNC folks are ruminating on right now? Are they patting themselves on the back for a job well done by Joe Biden, saying he's our man for 2024?
If they're the DNC folks that are the Biden people at the DNC, then they're ready to put poison
who are
in
the other folks
of their colleagues that are rooting for some other candidate. So it is blood sport in there, to be sure. There's no unity. I can guarantee you that.
Do you think we'll see an internecine warfare?
We've seen it. It's happening now. I mean, the kind of barbs that have come out against Biden for the classified document story, for instance, to me show a willingness by these reporters who are, by and large, Democrat influenced people or Democrat influencers, that they're giving permission to basically think bad things about Joe Biden. That to me is a big deal.
Absolutely. Now, Tim, final question goes to you. What should Joe Biden be aiming to do differently in his 2023 address, assuming that Kamala Harris hasn't usurped the throne?
Well, I would expect him to be probably a little more divisive than this year and talk more about the democracy is at stake and all that exaggerated rhetoric like he used at that, with the blood red backdrop at Independence Hall on July 4th. I mean, that was just so over the top, and I think people were affronted by that. But I think he feels like he has to do that because, look, there's not a person in this country except perhaps Dr. Jill Biden who is enthused about having Joe Biden as president.
Hunter, Tim.
Hunter, yes. Well, I'm not so sure about that either.
Hunter's hoping that Joe becomes emperor.
I don't think there would be an investigation if Hunter was just some former vice president's kid. But, nobody's enthusiastic about him. And he himself admitted he's just a placeholder. He's a generic Democrat. He's not Trump, not DeSantis, not Youngkin, not Haley, not Cruz, et cetera, and all those Republican hopefuls. And I think he's going to fall back on what he did in 2020, which is to simply be not the other guy and count on the media to put the wind at his back and somehow push him into the Oval Office for a second term, after which he would be 86 years old. Count him, 86.
That's with 12 zeros, Tim.
I know I'm going to be called ageist for that, but as a seasoned citizen myself, I get the right to say that.
Absolutely. Tim Donner, thank you very much. Scott Cosenza, thank you very much. And Graham Noble, thank you very much. And that's all we have time for on this special edition of Liberty Nation Radio, State of the Union Dissection here on the Radio America Network. I'd like to thank our panel, Tim Donner, Graham Noble, and Scott Cosenza, for joining us. Give my appreciation to you, the listeners out there who take the time to join the fun. My parting shot for this week, I want to take a brief moment to discuss advertising. For the State of the Union address is truly a public advertisement to sell an agenda and create user buy-in for the things to come. As Noam Chomsky remarked, it's important to bear in mind that political campaigns are designed by the same people who sell toothpaste and cars. And he's not far wrong. The public is sold on the features and benefits of an administration, but also something darker. We should perhaps take to heart the words of George Orwell in his essay, Why I Write. He said, all the papers that matter live off their advertisements, and the advertisers exercise an indirect censorship over news. Well, if that's true for papers, why would it not be the same for political advertisement? Thanks for listening. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides. Entertaining, informative, and just plain fun. Watch Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5. Produced by conservatives for conservatives. C5's The Left Free Zone. Hosted by Liberty Nation's Lisa K. Donner. Joined by a raucous, irreverent panel of authors. Deconstructing leftist narratives. Debating the hot topics. And remembering to laugh. Join the official conservative safe
You only
space.
did that to piss Jeff off.
Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5.